Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and in this series of 5 videos I'm going to show you how you can add a UIImagePickerController to your SwiftUI app so that you can both select a photo from your Photos album or take a photo with the device's camera. In the first video of this series we'll use a UIViewRepresentable in SwiftUI to add the picker from UIKit to accomplish this. And we'll also use a second UIKit view that will allow us to zoom in and pan on any image. In the second video, we'll be implementing some good and responsive error handling so that you'll be able to provide your users with feedback should they not have the right permission or if the device does not have a working camera. By the end of the second video, you'll have created the views and structure to be able to implement this in any one of your apps. Following the second video in part 2, if you wish to continue with the series, we'll add data persistence so that you can store your photos locally on your device along with other data such as the photo name so that we can retrieve and display that information on subsequent launches. We're going to do our best to follow best practices to check for and trap errors via throwing functions and provide a nice looking app that you could use as part of your portfolio of apps and learn some valuable skills along the way. This will take us quite a while over the 3 videos in the second part to accomplish because adding and testing your UI needs to be carefully done. You'll see how I work at building my apps. Now before I get started, I just want to ask that if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you ring the bell to be notified of future videos. Comments and likes are always appreciated. If you care to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. If this is something you want to learn, then keep watching. Now before we jump in, I want to share with you a short video that I prepared that will show you what the endpoint is. So here we go. I've created a starter project for this series and you can download it from the link in the description below. I have created logical groupings here where we will create and store our files. Some already have content in them. In the Views group, I currently have only the content view for now, and nothing has changed here but for the default. In the ViewModels group, since we'll be using MVVM, we'll create our view models. The Models folder is for creating any models that we might need. And in the UIViewRepresentables, I'm providing 2 views here, and they're simply UIKit views that have been made available to our SwiftUI code. I have an entire video on how to create UIView and UIViewController representables, and I'll leave a link in the notes below. There's an image picker one for picking images from the photo album and using the camera, and a second one that will help us zoom and pan in on our selected images. In the extensions folder, I provided a file manager plus extension because we'll be using the documents folder to store our images starting in video 3. So the file manager extension will provide me with the documents directory URL with this static variable and another function that will allow me to check if a document or of a specific name exists. And we'll be creating all other file storage and loading functions in this extension. For our assets, I provided an image that will be used for the launch screen, and I've added an entry into the info.plist for this. We also have an app icon, and both of these were created using Jordy Bruin's Bakery app that's available on the App Store. Well, we want to be able to either select an image from our photo album or be able to use the device's camera to take a photo and place it on the screen. We'll be using a modified MVVM design pattern for this project. So let's start right away by creating our view model, and we can do that within our view model grouping. I'm going to change the import to SwiftUI because we'll be needing that shortly. And then I'm going to create a new class called ViewModel that conforms to the observable object protocol. When we take a photo or pic from an album, we're going to have to assign it to a published property so that we can update our view. This will be a UI image, but because when the app launches we don't have one, we'll make it optional. We're also going to have to tap a button on the screen that will present the pickers, so we'll need another Boolean property that we can use to show the picker. So we'll create another published property, showPicker, and I'll initialize it as false. There are going to be a lot of things in that class, and we want to have access to it without having to pass an instance around using bindings, etc. And the way that we can provide access is to inject it into the environment as an environment object. So where your app launches, the one that's decorated with the @main property wrapper, we can inject an instance of the view model into the environment here attached to the content view. Then in Content View, we can use the @EnvironmentObject property wrapper to assign the view model to a property that you can call VM. Let's replace the text view with a VStack, and inside the VStack, we're going to display our view model's image if it exists. If not, we'll display a placeholder image. So to check to see if we have an image, we can use an iflet image equals vm.image, because remember it's optional. And then we can create an image from that UI image. We'll set it to resizable, scale to fit. We'll add a frame that has a minimum width of 0 but a max width of infinity. Otherwise, we'll create an image using the system image of photo.fill. This too can be resizable and scaled to fit as well. I'm also going to tone it down a bit by setting the opacity to 0.6. I'll add a frame that's the same as the one above. And I'll add some horizontal padding. Now let's push this image all the way up to the top by adding a spacer. If I refresh the preview, I'll get an error indicating that it can't preview because it's missing the environment object. So to stop the preview from complaining, I'll inject an instance into the environment of our view model on the content view in the preview provider struct. You should now see the placeholder image at the top of the preview. So let's embed this in a navigation view and set the navigation title to My Images. We're going to have two buttons, one that will allow us to select the camera and one for selecting an image. And we want these side by side. So just before the spacer, let's add an H stack. Then we're going to add two buttons. I'm going to leave the action for now and just create text view labels. The first one will say camera. And then I can duplicate that button, but I'll change the label of the second button to photos. and we'll return to stylize these a little bit later. The image picker view that I've provided in our UIViewRepresentables group is used for both picking a photo and for taking a photo with your camera. So we'll need to be able to pass in what is known as the source, and that will either be a camera or a library. And we're going to be performing some other checks when we try to access the camera. So let's create an enum called picker. And we'll do that in our models folder. And we'll use that as a namespace. Within this file, I'll create an enum called picker. That's our namespace. And then inside that, I'll create another enum called source. And that enum is going to have an associated type of string with two cases, library and camera. Returning now to our view model, we'll create a new property that I'll call source that is of type picker.source. And I'll make the initial default to be library. Now for the button actions in Content View. First, we'll specify the source type, which is either camera or library. And then we set our show picker property from the view model to true to initiate the showing of that picker. Presenting the picker is just like presenting a regular modal sheet. Attached to the VStack, we'll create a sheet method using isPresented that is bound to the view model's show picker property. Then within the body, we can call our image picker, which requires a source type, and then bound to that image that we want it to go to. And what we want to do is display this UIViewRepresentable. So as you can see, it's called image picker, and it requires a source type and a binding to an image. So in our sheet, we can specify the source type, which is not to be confused with our source. This is a UIImagePickerController source type, not our type, but we'll be able to map them. So if VM source equals library, we'll choose photo library, which is that source type from the UIImagePickerController. Else, it'll be a camera. Let's test this now in our simulator. First, we'll tap on the Photos button, and you'll see your photo album displayed. If I pick one, it gets displayed on the screen. That was pretty simple. Let's try the camera. If we tap on the camera, it crashes. It says, Source Type 1 not available. And this is because our simulator doesn't have a camera. So we're going to have to fix that so that it can run on a device that has a camera. Before we do that, however, let's suppress those other layout constraint errors that you see here. What we can do is open our myimagesapp.swift, where our project launches, and create an onAppear method on our content view. And when it appears, we want to set a key in user defaults that will turn off those warnings. So user defaults.standard, set a value of false for a key, which is the string _ UI constraint based layout log unsatisfiable. So let's return to the picker and see how we can prevent that crash. Inside the picker enum, I'm going to create a static function called checkPermissions that returns a Boolean value. If UIImagePickerController is source type available, specifying a camera, we'll return true. Otherwise, we'll return false. Now you may be wondering why I call this function check permissions instead of check camera availability, or just use a computed property instead. Well, you'll see shortly that I'm going to be using this function for more than just checking camera availability. If we return now to our ViewModel and create another function, and we'll call it showPhotoPicker, we can then check if the source is equal to .camera, and if not picker.checkPermissions, we can then print there is no camera on this device and just return. Otherwise, we want to actually show our picker, so we'll set showPicker to true. So if we return to content view in our buttons, we don't want to automatically just show the picker. We want to call this function showPicker to make sure that we actually have a camera in place before it actually invokes the picker. Let's test now, and we'll notice that these warnings no longer show in the console. If I tap on the Photos button, that still works. However, if I tap on the Camera button, we'll now get a printout indicating that there is no camera on this device. So that's perfect. Now, if you haven't updated your own phone to iOS 15, you can temporarily change the target to iOS 14 and this will all work. But eventually you'll need to be on iOS 15, and that would only be a temporary solution. So in order to complete this series, you're going to have a device running iOS 15. So let's test this on a device now. Let me run it on my phone. I can select a photo from the library just fine, and that's great. However, the app crashes when I try to run it on a device. And this because in order to use the camera, we also have to ask permission. And to trigger that request, we'll need to edit the info.plist. So we'll select the app target, and on the Info tab in the Custom iOS Privacy section at the top, I'm going to add a new entry and scroll down to the Privacy section until I find the one that is Camera Usage Description. And for the value, you're going to have to enter a string that's going to make some sense to your user. Something like, would like to use the camera to take photos. If I run this once more now, we can tap on the camera button and a dialog appears. We can tap on OK to grant permission. The camera will appear, and you're able to take a photo. And that result gets displayed in the image field. Before I do more testing, however, I want to fix one thing that bugs me. Let's run this once more. When I select the camera, the Cancel and Photo buttons are overlaying the viewfinder, and there is a large gap at the top between the navigation bar and the flash icon. To fix this, I need to go back to my content view, and then on our image picker, I need to attach the modifier ignores safe area. If I test again, you'll see that it works much better now. But there are still some problems, however. What if the user denied access? And I can test this out if I go to the Settings app on my phone and the Privacy section and locate Camera. And it's going to list all of the apps that have requested camera permission. And you can see it's turned on for the My Images app right now. I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to run it one more time and see what happens. This time when I select the camera, a black screen appears and you don't see the image. We're going to want to let our users know about this. So we'll have two different possibilities now then. Either there is no camera on the device, or a permission has been denied or turned off sometime after the fact. And we'll do that in the next video. But before I do that, however, I want to add one more thing. When we add our image to our image view, I want to be able to pinch and zoom and scroll within that image. And there's been a lot of discussion online about this, but I think I've found what I feel is the ideal solution, and that is to use another UIViewRepresentable, and I've provided that for you here. And the view is based on an article that I read in newbiedev.com site, and I'll provide a link to this in the description below too. And what this is simply a UIKit scroll view that we can embed in a SwiftUI view, and then get all of the benefits of that scroll view, such as pinch and zoom. The defaults have been set here to a maximum scale of 20 and a minimum of 1, but you can change that to meet your own needs. When you include this file in your project, you can use it immediately. If I return to Content View and then change my preview to use an iPhone 12 Pro, I can embed my image inside a Zoomable Scrollview, which is the name of that UIViewRepresentable. If I enter Preview now, right here in our canvas, and select an image, I can hold the Option key down on my keyboard and drag to simulate that pinch and zoom in and out of my photo. I can click and drag to pan and zoom in some more. This is exactly what I've been trying to accomplish. Well, that's enough for this video. In the next one, we'll add some responsive error handling to guide our user through the restrictions or errors that we have encountered, like no camera or invalid permissions. And that will be the end of part 1. And you'll have a viable solution that you can drop into any one of your apps.